What it do, what it do, what it do, soul visionaries and potential soul visionaries out there. I'm your host, Sherrod Corner. You are now rocking with the Soul Vision Powercast. You know that place where we keep it unfiltered and raw. We talk about anything from porn to politics. We'll even talk about those things you might have heard or saw. Today, I have a very special guest that's going to join me in a few seconds. His name is Dr. Terry Jackson. He's a dynamic executive advisor, thought leader, TEDx speaker, and organizational consultant. Dr. Jackson is also an entrepreneur and activist, and he has also authored 4 books. So we're going to talk to him today about normalizing bad behavior. Let's kick it. Doc, you made a post about the normalization of bad behavior. And every time I turn around, we blame everybody else for what's going on in our neighborhood. We know racism exists. We know all these things exist. But what do we need to do to get ourselves going back in the right direction?
Man, we should be focused on our own. You keep hearing people talk about the other people, the other people, the other people. Well, the bottom line is we know what the other people did.
Mm-hmm.
Now that we know what they've done, excuse me, we need to figure out what we need to do. See, I'm not mad at the other people. I'm mad at us for not doing what we need to do.
Right.
And we have the education, we have the dollars, we
Mm-hmm.
do have some institutions that we own. So the key now is how do we go through that mindset shift to understand that we have to do for self because there's no evidence that they're ever going to do for us what's in our best interest for us. There's no evidence to that to show that. So that means that we have to do for self. We have to get out of our cliquish ways because look, I'm in a small hometown. I'm a hometown,
Okay.
right? 400,000 people.
That's North Carolina, right?
Yeah, Wilmington, North Carolina.
Okay.
There's roughly about 12% of us in the city, but we are chopped up so fine into these cliques that we can't seem to come together to do what's in the best interest of all. I give you a prime example. I got a text message. I received a text message the other morning, and it says, "Who do you think are some of the leaders in our community?" I sat back. I said, "Well, I'm going to be real careful how I respond to this text." So I said, "I think we have a lot of managers
Mm.
managing interest of their concern.
Okay.
They have these interests, and so what they're doing is they're managing the interest." And then I finally said, "I don't think we have any leaders." And I include myself in that, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
I said, because a leader would help gather the people together, all the different cliques. They would help construct a vision, a strategy, a mission, dole out assignments so that that can be executed against. And I include myself in that because I'm a non-cliquish person, and I mix and mingle and communicate with everybody in the community.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell them whenever you need me, I raise my hand, you can call on me, and I'll come do whatever you need me to do. But I probably should have been corralling everybody. So here recently, what I've begun to do is uh, I've re-engaged with the Masonic craft, and recently I've become the worshipful master of the lodge. And so I told the lodge, I said, look, I don't need to be the worshiper master. The title is not important to me. I said, because my resume speaks for itself.
Okay.
So it's not about any power or authority. I said, but what I see this is, and as we all know, all fraternities and sororities come out of Prince Hall Masonry. All come out of that if you go through the research.
Okay.
And I said, so the reason I'm here and I've re-engaged because it's bigger than me, it's bigger than Prince Hall Masonry, it's bigger than fraternity and sororities. The key question is, can we as Black men work together to do what's in the best interest of our Black community?
Mm-hmm.
People want to see, our people want to see, can we work together? Whether we're educated or uneducated, can we work together because we have a common denominator? And that common denominator is our Blackness. That wasn't a choice. Everything else is a choice. Me going to school and getting degrees, the neighborhood that I live in, the church that I attend. All of those are choices.
Okay.
What wasn't a choice was being born Black. So the question is, given all the diversity in our community, can we find a common denominator to work together? So it's bigger than that. So what I've started to do is I started to reach out to all the different groups of Black men in the city and say, hey, I want you guys to become a part of this whole thing of Prince Hall Masonry. Not that it's about Prince Hall, but what it really is about is we will have someone in every aspect of industry, of education, in every within this organization, in this community. So if there are banking issues, we know about the banking issues, we can go discuss them, we can influence it. If there are political issues, we have somebody on city council or we have someone on the county commissioner. We have professors from the university. We have people who are deeply embedded in the social services arena. We have somebody embedded in housing, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have somebody embedded on the education, the board of education, right? We need to have somebody everywhere. And if I begin to bring those people together from those areas, then we can have a voice. And then we can come back and also begin to talk to our people about what's actually going on, what is in our best interest. We can begin to do what others have said we don't have. We can begin to build an agenda for what we
Mm.
need to have happening in our local communities and communities across the state, communities across the country. So now we can go to the next presidential candidate or to the parties and say, hey, we have an agenda. Given what our agenda is, what do you have to what what are you willing to give us for our vote? What are you willing to give us for our support? Because right now we have no agenda. Everybody else has an agenda. And I
Right.
think it's real simple. It's no different than all the areas that already exist. Education, uh, banking, housing, healthcare, all of those areas. We should have someone from every one of those areas that's a Black male or Black female that's a part of this group. So that's what I've been doing. Now, sometimes it's difficult. Why? There's a divide that's happening in our that happened in our community some time ago. That divide has a tendency to be whether you went to college or not. So education or not. People don't understand that the best education is self-education. But they want to know you got a degree because they want to be able to classify you, right?
Okay.
Yeah, and so it's interesting because even in the Prince Hall Lodge, as I look around the lodge, there's probably one or two other brothers who who have college degrees. Muslim brother asked me an interesting question probably a month and a half ago. I was telling him about my re-engagement in the craft and what my vision was and what I was trying to do. And he knows a lot of the older members because my lodge, just to say, my lodge, Gibbelum number 2, is the second oldest lodge in the state of North Carolina. It was built in 1871 by our ancestors who were just recently freed from slavery.
Okay.
The building still exists. It's three stories. So we have very famous people. If I threw out some names and told you who they were, you'd be like, wow, all of those people came out of that lodge. I can tell you about Robert Taylor. Robert Taylor was the first African American in this country ever to receive a PhD in architecture from MIT. His father was a shipbuilder. His name was Henry Taylor. The first black doctor and the first black attorney in the state of North Carolina were members of my lodge in the 1800s.
Mm.
And so I can go on and on and on about the history of Giblum um, that span across the world. That people that you hear the names, for instance, you've seen the picture of a lot of the doing Reconstruction when we had a lot of people in Congress. Well, as I look at those pictures, what I look at now is I wonder, was that person a Prince Hall Mason? And so as I go to do the research on the name, I find out that all of those brothers were. And the question was why? Why? Because you hear some things, oh, masonry this and satanic this and all the
Yeah,
craziness,
yeah.
right? All the craziness, right? And so what I do is I go do my research. And I finished reading a book not long ago. The book was written in 1902, and they talked about ancient Egypt, the cradle of ancient masonry. A book written in 1902 by a white guy.
1902. Okay.
Okay. So when we go beyond all the rhetoric, all the superficial research, when we go back to Kemet, where that's where masonry started. Masonry was nothing but a set of tools. And those set of tools I'm gonna give you, and we know them today as the liberal arts. Those set of tools was arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, music, grammar, rhetoric, and logic.
So would those be
That's
the
what
tools that were used by the so-called enlightened or illumined ones? Is that what that is?
that's all it is, the illumined ones. The knowledge that they utilized to build. So they built physical structures, but in gaining this knowledge, you built yourself as a structure. You developed yourself as a man to be able to make a contribution in your society. So you use the tools, you use the plumb and the square to help build the pyramids, but you also built the mind and the spirit
Mm.
and the body at the
The,
same time.
the most important structure.
Exactly. So what happened is as our people begin to leave out of Kemet and leave Africa and go other places, we taught others. And I don't have to say anymore. We taught
Right.
others. As we taught them, they took that knowledge, they bastardized that knowledge. They created this thing called masonry with 32 degrees, with the 33rd degree being an honorary degree. And they repackaged it and sold it to us as something that wasn't ours. It came out of the quote unquote the Grand Lodge of England. And so Prince Hall, being in Boston and being an abolitionist, saw some power in regaining those skills. And so he created Prince Hall Masonry. You know, Prince Hall himself was friends with George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Paul Revere because he did the leathering for them
Okay.
as a free man. And so he started the first school in his living room for black kids in Boston. I could read you some letters, things that he talked about condemning the others for the enslavement of our ancestors. And so if we don't know our history, we say some of the crazy things that we hear other people say
Mm-hmm.
about the craft because we don't know. We're just saying things that other people have said. And other people may use it a particular way, but not our people. Our people have never used it that way. I give you an analogy. It's like you hear people say, "Man, that person there worked roots. They're a root worker." So what does that really mean? Let's talk about our ancestors who went out into the woods and got the herbs, right? Because you were sick and they knew what plants to use in order to solve your illness.
Right.
Those were the people where that came from. It was about healing. It was about knowledge of nature, understanding what plant can help you heal as a human being. And somehow they sold us that as something being evil. And
Witch
now today,
witch doctors and
with
voodoo and
ex,
all.
man, yes, man, they sold us all of that. And when in fact, you know, do you know how astute you have to be able to go out and look at the plants and know which ones will heal the body?
Yeah.
Now, let's think about the green movement today. Let's think about the whole vegetarian movement today, right? Let's
Okay.
think about all the herbs today, and let's think about Dr. Sebi. That's exactly where that knowledge came from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, until our people begin to do research without speaking and learn all they can, and even go and ask questions, we're going to be stuck because there's so many myths, there's so much misinformation and disinformation in our community that we carry along because we fail to read. I'm reading a book now that I've read before. The first book by Dr. Naeem Akbar was New Visions for Black Men.
New visions for black
Well,
men.
let me back up. The first book was Visions for Black Men. I read that book back in the 90s.
Visions for black
This book is New Visions for Black Men, right? And you know who Dr. Naeem Akbar? He's a psychologist. He actually taught at the University of Michigan. He went down to Florida State and headed up the psychology department. He was at Norfolk State as a professor. And if you remember the book, um, "Makes Me Want to Holler" by Nathan McCall, he was the one who mentored and tutored Nathan McCall to write that book, Dr. Naeem Akbar. And so we got to read and we got to research and we got to have dialogue. Ultimately, we got to search for the truth,
men. Yeah.
right?
I'm gonna put those three
Yeah.
books in the description so that folks can.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Please do. We got to go. We got to search for the truth because ultimately, we have to come together on our own. I mentioned to you that here recently, let's within the last 2 to 3 months, I've come across in my travels brothers and people have introduced me to certain people for certain reasons. Maybe I could help them with a business idea as a consultant. And so what's happened is I've run across brothers who've been in the investment banking industry for 25 years, who starting their own business, who understand all the fundamentals of finance and how to create investment vehicles to put into the marketplace to generate dollars, how to create hedge funds. I've run into brothers who are looking to buy manufacturing facilities. I've run into brothers in the music industry who are moving themselves away from the record labels and creating their own. And for some reason, there's somebody out there who knows Dr. Jackson who says, "Look, you need to meet this person. I think you can help them." I've run into brothers who are owning young brothers who are owning car dealerships who are seeking funding to grow their franchises. I'm
Right.
talking about Ford, and Nissan. And so, in so doing, I've partnered with a brother who is a former investment banker. We're creating a hedge fund, and we've been helping young entrepreneurs or black entrepreneurs with funding. This one particular brother, um, looking to grow his car dealerships. We're helping with funding for $16 million to grow this. I got another gentleman who he has 36 car repair, glass repair, collision shops in which he work on high-end vehicles.
Wow.
He's making about $40 million a year. I've met other brothers who are selling jet fuel to the company. They're
Okay.
in the I met these brothers in the music business who they showed me some of their numbers, and they're making millions and millions. And so I'm like, I'm bringing all of those brothers together to do a couple things. The hedge fund, the mergers and acquisitions to begin to buy businesses. We're funding some brothers to build uh, uh, communities.
Okay.
There's one project across in a state where it's roughly a $353 million project, and it's the building of single family homes and apartments and condos in the same space, right? That's going to go to at least 3 cities. And so what I'm really getting at is I've met some of the people with some of the vehicles that we need as a people
Okay.
to grow. Because at the end of the day, it's really about economics. When Dr. King started speaking about the war, and he started speaking about uh, getting our check because they'd given check to all of their
Right.
people, that's when he was assassinated. One of the things that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad did when he was living, he built businesses. He had restaurants. He owned an airport. He had his own airplane. He had his own farm. And a lot of people don't realize that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad had all of that, right? Now, upon his death, a lot of that was lost by the nation. And so what we have to do is build commerce and do commerce with each other. We keep talking about Black Wall Street. Black Wall Street already exists. What is it? It's all of the black businesses that are scattered across the country that we fail to do business with. We're not going to get another, we're not going to get another place where we just walk down the street in our cities and those are black businesses that we can do business with. We already have them.
And see, that's what I was going to
We
ask you about is that, it's not a centralized location where black people will come together, but it's a more of expanded community of black businesses all around in which we need to, use the internet, other different vehicles to get in touch with one another because we use the social media platforms for everything, it seems, but bringing us together to do business, real business with one another.
Because when you begin to do real business with one another, it spills into every aspect of our lives. One, doing real business with each other improves the quality of the lives of our families because we have more disposable income to work with, to really enjoy, to have the health care that we need, to be able to go on vacation to release some of that stress, to provide those funds for your children if they want to go to college and get a degree, or to go to community college, or whatever or to go into business for themselves, right?
Right.
That's what it takes. And so we have to be able to connect the dots, right? We have been taught this real analytical approach to life. And analytical approach is not anything that our ancestors ever utilized. This was used as a system when I gave you those words. It was a system, right? It wasn't, let me break it down to its lowest common denominator. And then once I do that, let me apply what I'm going to call an answer to the problem. But now, when I give you the answer to the problem, I'm not considering all the other areas that's going to be impacted by that answer. So now, when I give you an answer for this, I'm causing dysfunction over here because I'm not seeing it as a system. I'm seeing it as individually. Look, they never they never really tell us the relationship between math and our language. They've never taught us to understand the relationship between me and a blade of grass outside. The greatest teacher we have is nature.
Hmm.
If I look to nature, I can solve all my problems. So guess what? When Dr. Jackson has a serious issue, the first question I ask is, what can nature teach me about this?
I'm taking notes, bro.
Yeah.
What
What
can
can nature teach me about this? And so let me go to one of the most difficult topics that we face in this country, and that's the whole white supremacy, racism, diversity, equity, inclusion, whatever you want to call it. Right? I go to nature. When I look outside and I see these green leaves, I see pigmentation.
hmm
From a natural perspective, everything has a level of pigmentation for support because it's only a biological function. That's all it serves as. It serves for the trees and the plants to go through a process called photosynthesis, which we as African Americans and Africans, we go through photosynthesis because our carbon or melanin, whatever you want to call it, serves as an energy conductor, and we absorb in this sunlight and this water, and we turn it into energy. So when I look into nature and I see others without that pigmentation, it means that they were a mutation, something different. I don't know of anything that is natural, hear me clearly, that is natural, that comes without pigmentation. There's nothing comes into nature. Everything comes into nature has a pigment, unless man has created a hybrid.
Okay.
So that pigmentation allows for the absorption of the sun for energy.
Okay.
In the summertime, what happens in the wintertime? Everything dies off and becomes brown. In spring and the summertime, you can look at a tree and see it lean toward and grow toward and stretch toward the sun.
The light, right? Yeah.
Even in the deepest forest, you see the lean because it's trying to get that energy. It's trying to get that light. It's very few natural plants or flowers you ever see that are white. You just don't see it in nature. There's nothing coming new into nature that's that color. That doesn't have, let me back up and say, there's nothing that comes new into nature that does not have pigment because the sun is the giver of life.
Right.
Without it, that's when everything changes colors. So we go back to where our ancestors come from, the region of the world, and the reason for the pigmentation. And sometimes I will even you have to meet people where they are. So sometimes I'll say, well, if God put me here and I'm in his image, that meant that I look like him. Because he had to look at himself to see what the first man was going to look like. Just to put it in a biblical sense for people to get that.
Right.
And so anything other than that, and even going to the to the Christian doctrine, if you dig into that Bible, you'll find that leprosy was to be considered white. It says it in about 3 books. In 3 books, it talks about how God tested a couple people and said, put your hand in your cloak. So when you put the hand in the cloak, it was one way when you pulled it in, when you put it in there. When you pull it out of there, it says that the hand was as white as snow. And when you put it back, it indicates that it went back to its natural pigmentation. So to be a leper, which was a disease, meant in the Bible that you were white. You can, if you Google it, you can pull it up and you can find not only the books, but you can find the verses where it describes that leprosy meant to be white, which was not normal. It was against nature. There are a lot of doctrines that we may not necessarily believe in, but all of them have truth. So
Hmm.
we have to be able to do the research and connect the dot. They never preach about that. They never talk about that, but it's there. I've shown some of my elders because, they're deeply
Yeah.
engaged in the
Yeah.
church and religion. Just like one of the things I've been telling people to do here lately, well, you got the whole thing going on in Gaza. And so I said, if you go to John 8:33 through 45, you'll see where there was a quote unquote conversation happening between Jesus and the Jews. And in that conversation, it would be a conversation if it was had today, Jesus would be considered an anti Semite. And here's how the conversation goes. Jesus says, I know who you are. You are of your father, the devil. If you were with me and of my father, you would love me and you would be with me and you would not want to kill me. This is what Jesus is saying to the Jews.
Mm.
So if he says, you are of your father, the devil, so that means that the devil had kids too.
Yeah.
It also says that those, as I've heard some people call it, the synagogue of Satan, right? And I don't get into
Right.
to all of that, but I'm just pointing out what's before our eyes that we don't know. So if he had the conversation and said, "You are of your father, the devil," and remember, they was trying to say that Jesus was a Jew too, and I said, no, Jesus was Hebrew. There was a difference between Jew and Hebrew. One is culture and one is bloodline. One is DNA. Jew is culture because you and I, we can apply today to Israel to become a Jew, and all they got to do is accept this and say yes, and so now we would consider Jewish.
Mm. Okay. Yep.
That's an application. But Hebrews are born, given the region of the world that they were from. I read a book by Dr. Gert Miller, who's a white historian, anthropologist out of the UK. He says all Hebrews were black, but not all blacks were Hebrew. And he goes down through the lineage of the DNA to prove all of this. And I got the books in there. So it comes back to what Malcolm said. And you see, I got on my Malcolm shirt. We have to know who we are. Everybody else knows who we are.
We don't.
We don't know who we are. And we do some of the foolish things that others want us. I call us the Frankenstein of America. You're familiar with the Frankenstein story.
Hmm.
There was a doctor who created Frankenstein, and he created him and he molded him to do what he wanted him to do and to think as he wanted him to think. So as I look at African Americans, we are the Frankensteins of America because we are embodied in this African temple, but we have our thought processes of the European. And for those who don't know, Europe itself is not a continent. It's called Eurasia. But
Hmm.
when they name Europe, Europe, Europe was named after a black African princess, excuse me. Her name was Europa. But if we don't dig, we don't know. We don't know that everything that we see that they've given us was ours, and they took it and repackaged it and gave it back to us
At a cost, a heavy cost.
at an extreme heavy cost. The poverty that exists. Look, when our people were enslaved, we did all of the work. We grew all the crops. We built all the buildings. They had no skills. It's only when we were let go from that bondage and didn't have the resources and the tools were we not as productive. But again, I just gave you the history of my lodge. It was built in 1871. So we're talking about 8 years after slavery was ended. They, so the brothers at the time had nothing, but they built a three-story building to have lodge meetings in. Not only that, but there are black churches that I can go to right now that I know my Masonic brothers from that time designed and built those churches. I've been in them and I've seen the woodwork, and it's immaculate. And those churches are still standing. There was a brother, like I said, Henry Taylor. He was a shipbuilder. I had never heard of a black shipbuilder before until I began to do the history on who he was and what he did. And his ships sailed from here to Brazil. I don't know of any black shipbuilders today. All of that takes place right now, probably in somewhere in Greece, overseas, Norway, right?
Right. Wow.
So what I've been trying to do is bridge the gap of business and history because you can't have one without the other. Every conquest has been about economics. It's the conquering of a people and resources. And if we really think about that, we've been at war. We've been at war. We just don't want to acknowledge this because business is war. Because what am I trying to do? What I'm trying to do is get what we consider to be the greatest resource we have, money, in exchange for a good or a service. And as I take the money away from you and I give you a good or service that you can never return to me for the same price, and I'll never really going to give you back that money. That's why they created a thing called value. You hear the term called value. Well, it's worth 400, $500. Well, that's you got $400 worth of value. But I'm never going to get that money back that I can take in exchange for goods or services or land or invest it to get it to grow. And so once we understand that business is war and that what we've been at war with others since we've met each other. And that war it was about the conquering of the mind, the body, and the spirit to enslave a group of people, to take them away from their continent and get them to work. So that was a conquest. Ultimately, the conquest was about the root of the conquest was economics, because now that I have you working for free, I can become wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding history, I have to understand business. To understand business, I have to understand history. Because as we look at Gaza today, we're talking about land, conquering of a people, or annihilating a people. And most importantly, what people are not talking about is on the eastern part of where they are. They want to build another canal for ships to go through so that it doesn't have to go all the way around Africa. They're tired of dealing with the Suez Canal and paying those fees. They really want to build another canal on the eastern part. So if they can get that piece of land, it will enable them to do so. And for the most part, what we don't understand, and I've heard people say this, well, I'm not going, the Palestinians have never stood up for us, meaning black
I've,
people. For the most
I've
part,
heard that,
yeah,
man.
yeah, but for the most part, most of the Palestinians look like you and I. We just don't see them. Most of the Palestinians look like you and I. Because remember, even in the biblical doctrine, they said that Jesus was a Palestinian. Now go back to John 8:33 through 45, and you get the people over there doing what they're doing to the Palestinians. You are of your father, Satan. It's an interesting conversation that he's having with them in the Bible. It's a very interesting conversation.
3:45,
Yeah, John 8:33 through 45.
33.
Yeah, you read that whole, you can read all of that and see what it says. And what we don't understand is it it's the Zionists that are actually running that show, what's happening in Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
So those Zionists are people who said they're using Judaism as their religion and they're supporting it, um, but their true driver is economics. It's
Yeah.
I can't say it's capitalism, but it's real close to capitalism because we know if we do a DNA assessment of those people, their heritage takes them back to the Caucasus Mountains,
Mm-hmm.
takes them back to Europe. It takes them back to Europe, right? They have no tie to that land whatsoever. It's only in 1947 when they went over there and created this space that we know is Israel. Because initially they wanted to use Uganda. They actually chose Uganda. Uh, but as they began to read more about the doctrine from a guy named uh, Theodore Herzl, Herzl was the guy who created what we know as Zionism.
Mm. Never knew
And
that.
that piece of, yeah, Theodore Herzl created this thing called Zionism. And that guy, actually, his doctrine is used to do all that we see happening today around Israel. And you probably know this. Do you know that in Israel and Palestine and that whole Middle Eastern area where the Israelis and the Jews are, it's illegal to have a DNA test there.
No, I didn't know that.
It is illegal. So that tells you a great deal because in doing the DNA test, it's going to come back that they have no claim to that land from a genetic perspective whatsoever. It is illegal. You will go to jail for doing a DNA test in that area.
Wow. Well, they say, if you want to know who's in control, you just find out who you can't talk about and and learn about. You know, wow. I see.
That,
I didn't know that. I see. I knew that you couldn't speak on the Holocaust in certain lands, and that's because in Michigan they were actually trying to pass a law to make it a felony if you ever denied it. So just learning more about, man, you can't even have a DNA test even prove their validity to the claims that they're making for that land. It seems like it just goes hand in hand and whatnot.
it does go hand in hand. And then let's consider this. I can talk about I can talk about slavery all day. I don't know if you've read the trilogy, uh, The Secret Relationship Between Jews and Blacks, that was written by the Nation of Islam. It's
No.
a trilogy, 3 books. They go in, they go into the deep details of it all. And the genius of what they did in those 3 volumes was this. They didn't go out and send their researchers to regular libraries. They sent their researchers to Jewish libraries and Jewish rabbis. So all of their research came directly from what Jewish scholars wrote about their role in the slave trade. So when they asked the minister to denounce the books, he says, I can't denounce the books unless you're telling me that your scholars were liars. Are you saying that your scholars lied about what they wrote in the books? And of course, they couldn't say. So, anti Semitic. The and I'm sure you know that the minister has sued the ADL.
Yeah, I've heard. Yeah, I've heard something about that.
That's going to be real interesting for a couple of reasons. They're going to have to define what a Semite is because you're using the term anti Semitic. So if I'm anti something, to be for it, what does it mean? So if I have to define Semite, then what's going to happen is that definition is not going to be a description of who they say they are. Because if you define what a Semite is, you'll find that Semites range from the northern tip of Africa to the southern tip of Africa. And a Semite really isn't a group of people. A Semite were languages. Dr. John Henry Clark spoke about this years ago. So it's people who speak specific languages that are considered to be Semitic.
Okay.
So they fool the world into thinking that being a Semite means that you are a Jewish person. No, it's the languages you speak. You have in the Detroit area, you have Chaldeans, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Chaldeans were a Semitic people. Most of them are brown skinned or dark skinned people, right?
Yeah, you got some. You got some dark Chaldeans. Yeah.
Yeah, but the originals were dark. You had the Akkadian. The Akkadians were dark skinned people. Those were people who spoke Semitic language. If you go pull up the word Semitic and you research it, you're going to find all of these different groups of people that spoke Semitic languages. And it's going to tell you that they were a part of, you know, they're part of Africa. And so the conversation has to be had. They always want to use it. You're anti Semitic. But if
Oh
I'm anti
wow.
Semitic, yeah,
It
you
says
see it?
relating to or denoting a family of languages that includes Hebrew, Arabic, and Aramaic, and certain ancient languages such as Phoenician and Akkadian, constituting the main subgroup of the Afro-Asiatic family.
Afro-Asiatic family. Afro-Asiatic family. It said nothing about European family. It said
N-
Afro-Asiatic.
that's it. And then,
So,
wow.
so now, when they use the term anti-Semitic, and you go to what it means to be a Semite, there's no correlation, there's no connection.
Right.
Again, there's a group of people who have stolen another people's identity and repackaged it and sold it. Dr. John Henry Clark talked about it years ago. But if we don't know, if we
Right.
don't read it, if you just, well, oh yeah, he's anti-Semitic. Well, brother, what does it mean? Who does that pertain to? We got to do more. We got to go. We got to find out, man. We got to read. We got to research.
And it's like we we don't research, but we regurgitate.
That's it.
You know,
That's
hey,
all we
it
do.
sounds good. Hey, such and such said it, so it has to be true. Instead of saying, you know what, it's interesting. Let me delve off into it deeper to see if he or she is in fact telling the truth about what they're saying.
You know, uh, I've had people, oh, you're part of that uh, fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha. Yeah, I am. Dr. King was a part of it too. Dr. King was also a Mason. There are lots of other people. From 1865 to 1925, if you were a prominent, successful black man, If you were a man of influence, you were a Prince Hall Mason.
Okay.
So go and look at all them men and all the things that they created and then tell me, quote unquote, is it evil? We talk about the boule, right? No, let me go back to the Illuminati. Let me go to the Illuminati because
Okay.
my thought process is this. My thought process is this. And I don't know. This is what I'm thinking. If there's a group of people that has this power called the Illuminati, and we know that their agenda would probably doesn't include us because it's about power and control. If that agenda doesn't include us, why would they let us invite us to become a part of the Illuminati?
Some can say that what do they call it? The gatekeepers.
Yeah, but they kill the gatekeepers too. They killed the gatekeepers too. Some people consider Dr. King a gatekeeper and what happened to him. At the same time that they was approving the March on Washington, there was somebody in the White House uh, designing his death at the
Mm.
very same time. Because we know that the government had a hand in it because they admitted it. They even paid the King family some money in the 90s saying that we had a role in the death of Dr. King.
So basically, would you just say that the majority of those folks are just pawns?
There's a great book that I read years ago called Pawns in the Game. If you haven't read it, I would read it. Pawns in the Game.
Pawns in the game.
How does it, if I'm in control and I have power, what does it hurt me if I let one or two become wealthy? Because we can count. We can count. See, that's the thing that we don't pay attention to. What they throw in front of us every time they begin to talk about wealth. What they throw in front of us are entertainers and athletes.
Mm-hmm.
This one right here. Now, of course, if you pay attention, you see that a lot of entertainers and athletes, they gain some wealth and they lose it. Or I'm not going to say they gain wealth. They gain riches.
Riches, right, right.
Riches and wealth are different. So they'll gain it and they'll lose it, or they'll intentionally go after them to destroy them.
Mm-hmm.
They'll send somebody at them to kill them. They'll send somebody at them to send them to prison, and then all of a sudden you're seeing all these people, these young athletes or musicians or rappers, whatever you want to, however you identify them, they get these criminal cases,
Yeah, they
and so they're
assassinate the
going.
character first.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. They've always done that, and we don't understand it. And so, you got our young kids. What do you want to be? I want to be a rapper. Why do you want to be a rapper? Seems like the average lifespan of a rapper is probably 27 years. Why would you want to do that?
Yeah.
Because they're killing each other for no reason. No reason. You're not seeing any of those young country and western artists kill each other. You're not seeing Justin Bieber and them boys, that kill each other. You're not seeing any of them young rock artists kill each other. Why is that? Why is it just the young black rappers that are killing each other?
I've often, for me, my thing was, you know, what I've noticed is that young black men from a very young age are told how to treat everyone else besides themselves. It's not focused on a love you. You're somebody. It's like, growing up, I like I said, I noticed that it's, hey, never hit a girl, respect your mother, respect your parents, but it's never, hey, young black boy, love you. And I've often told people, if we start teaching our young black men how to love themselves first, then when they see someone that looks like them, they're able to give that same love out to them. Because, we need to teach each all. Hey, you want to be a Crip, you want to be a Blood, you want to be in these groups. That's cool. But now you have to turn that energy into something else now. Instead of you going out banging on each other, now it's time for y'all to take care of your community like it was meant to be in the beginning of these the establishment of these organizations, right? So that's what I think, man. We've as a community, we've done a terrible disservice to the young black boy. We haven't shown him how important he truly is to himself and to us as a whole.
I agree with you 100%. See, our younger brothers, they have it twisted. And I've told some here that I know. I said, you guys got it twisted because he has on blue or red, you think he's your enemy. He's never been the enemy. He's your brother because you're looking at a piece of cloth. But if you look at your skin, it's the same. I say, I'll be real honest with you. The enemy has never changed. The enemy has always been white. And I say, the enemy now uses his pen to create policy. So you have to look at the policies that are created. If a policy, if they're not letting your mother get a mortgage to buy a home or a loan to get a car so she can go to work, or give your mother a job or your father a job or let them get an education, that's the enemy. I said, now go back and do some research on the 1950s and 60s when you see the black entertainers, the black athletes, and the black scholars who are all one because they understood what the fight was. They understood what the enemy was. Today, you don't understand because you think you've been accepted into a society where everything is okay because you can live in a particular neighborhood. You can go to a particular shopping center. You can go to the movies and you're all sitting in there together. But the more you see that, and the more you see what other people are doing today, you'll also see that that hate never went away. All you have to do is look at the Karens who were little children at that time, and they're actually acting out what they truly feel. That's why they call the cops on you. They call the police on you because they're hoping the police come and do something to you.
Yeah. Based on history, they know
Yes,
once
the
they call
history.
that.
Yes, it's all based on history. So you you're looking down the mall corridor and you see a brother with a different color and you think he the enemy. When in fact you're in the mall because what are they trying to do? They're trying to take your resource, your money, to build, to sell you some product that you can do nothing with, to build wealth for the most part. Because more than likely, you're not in there buying any books anyway. You're
No.
buying some Jordans, you're buying some jeans, you're buying a shirt, or you're buying some sunglasses. You're buying something that means nothing.
Right.
And I'm sure you've seen it in the malls now. They even have stores in the mall now where these guys are taking the Jordans and painting them different colors and putting different designs on them, and they're selling these Jordans.
Yeah.
And the brothers are buying them, and they think that they have some value, but it
Man,
only cost about
15,
$16.
yeah, $1,500 for a pair of shoes. I remember I was watching 50 Cent. He went
Hmm.
into this to the stores and dude says, those are 5,000. And I guess because it's 50, they think he was gonna buy it. He said, man, I can go buy a used car for this and go to work.
That's right.
You know what I'm
That's
saying?
right.
It's like, you know, and that's the thing that I wish our folks would understand is that, you know, my mom used to work for Hudson's back in the day.
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
so she used to work for Hudson's at this place called Oakland Mall. And she did a lot of the ordering. That's when I
Hmm.
found out how much those gym shoes really cost. You know, it's like
That's right.
$6. And like, mom, these revolutions are 110 at the time, and
That's right.
110 was a lot of money back then. But
That's
when you
right.
only paying $6 to make that shoe and you could charge 110, that's a hell of a markup.
Yeah, that's right. That's true. That's so very true. And so you know, there's a there's a deconstruction that has to happen,
Okay.
and there's a reconstruction that has to happen simultaneously.
A tear
You
down
can't
to
do it.
build up.
Yes, you got to do it simultaneously, and that's the only way that I think we're going to get in a position to really. I'll say this: a friend of mine who's a teacher down in the Atlanta school system.
Okay.
He calls me from time to time. We have good conversation. I served on his dissertation committee when he wrote his dissertation for his doctorate, and we've become very good friends. He's a younger brother, and he keeps telling me that we've lost the war. He said, "I'm watching the kids in the school system. We've lost the war. We'll never catch up." And I don't want to believe that, but this is what he's telling me.
Yeah.
And but as I observe the evidence, he says, there's not a generation that's coming that's going to be of the mindset that we were. Uh, and again, he's probably 15 years younger than I am, right? And, when I think about my time going to first grade, second grade in a desegregated school, excuse me, in a segregated school,
Okay.
and then third grade, desegregation happens in the South. But coming out of that time of the 60s where you saw the struggle, you saw and you knew who Dr. King was. Dr. King was supposed to come to my hometown April 5th, 1968. He was assassinated April 4th. I sat on my grandmother's lap April 4th, 1968 at 6:30 watching Walter Cronkite on CBS. And he said Dr. King had been assassinated. And my grandmother said they let him die. Those are memorable words. I never forget those words. Watching the news, sitting on my grandmother's lap, and she said they let Dr. King die. Because the next day he was supposed to be in Wilmington, my hometown. There's so much that's been lost in history. And one of the things that we know they don't want us to teach because they're trying to eliminate it from the schools is teaching about Black history and teaching about slavery. Because it should ignite us to be curious enough to dig, to find out why would such a people why would such a people hate us so much? Why would they treat us this way? What was it about us? Understanding who we are. Because if we keep going back and we keep digging and we keep visiting, and I want I mentioned slavery, but we also got to dig back to the 5,000 years prior to, right, to see the kings and the queens.
Mm-hmm.
But then we got to also understand that if everybody came out of Africa, we were already here.
Yeah.
We already existed. We already existed here. We were the indigenous
Yeah.
people here when they start talking about the copper colored people that they saw. They found a way from that landmass to this landmass, and we were already here.
I
And
mean,
they began to
the,
yeah,
the
they
Grand Canyon.
reclassified us
Yeah.
different things.
The
Yes,
Grand Canyon supposedly has a lot of Egyptian artifacts, and then when you look at teepees are shaped like pyramids. And when you go to Mexico, there's pyramids that we circumnavigated this globe, man, way before anybody else. And like you said, we were already here. We were taken over. We lost the war. That's what we did. We're prisoners of war.
because rumor has it that Mansa Musa, who was considered to be the richest man to ever live,
Hmm.
was actually Montezuma in Mexico. Because remember, he made a pilgrimage to this side from Timbuktu. And when they talk about the gentleman with all the gold, many people say that he was Montezuma in Mexico.
Oh, never. See, I never heard that. Never heard that.
And so we the Olmecs, we know the Olmecs were down in Africa. They've uncovered all the huge Olmec heads
Hmm.
down there,
Hmm.
and all these mounds that they keep talking about were actually pyramid type of building, right? The mounds. And there's so many mounds in Mexico, Mississippi, Alabama, Memphis, and now there's a story and there's a narrative being talked about that I'm not as familiar with, but I need to become familiar with, where people are saying America was the actual Egypt.
Oh, now
It's
that's a spin on the story. I've never heard
that's a
that.
whole yeah.
I've
Here within the last 2 months, I've been seeing that pop up everywhere.
Now,
Um,
let me ask you a question because at one point it was a supercontinent, the Pangea, right? We were
Pangea.
all connected together, so it was like one landmass, and everything broke apart. You know, now do you think that could have been,
The-
people really said, okay, this is really Egypt, but these parts broke apart and reclassified and renamed like they did everything else?
you know, it, I'm going to say it's possible
Okay.
because I actually saw two white men on TikTok talk about it, and I was like, again, one of the things that they've been great is suppressing different voices. There were great white scholars who talked about the greatness of Africa
Okay.
and the knowledge that come out of Africa. Gert Miller is one of them out of the UK, right? You had guys in the early 1900s who were talking about this. You just got to go discover their work. Their
Okay.
work is for whatever reason is no longer printed, and lots of other things, right? And so and these were great white scholars. I've heard Dr. Henry Clark talk about it, but their work has been suppressed, and they were writing about Africa, the greatness of Egypt, all of that. And so when I find these white historians begin to talk about this information, then you really have to take listen because those guys are after the truth.
And then you got to realize that I don't think they would want to denounce themselves. Like if you, hey, like you just said, Farrakhan and the minister, hey, no, these books came from your folks. We just did research. So if you want to say I'm lying, then you got to say your folks lying.
That's right. Absolutely. And so we have to be able to. One of the things I've always said is this. Let's consider all the books that exist in the United States of America.
Okay.
Now let's think about what books they didn't let come here and
Oh
why.
my.
What knowledge did they not let within the US and why? Because just as many that are here and released, there's just as many, just like they're banning books, right? I'm sure it's like the founding fathers who didn't want a central banking system. Remember that now. We got the Federal Reserve today, but that happened through Jekyll Island. But in the Constitution, the brothers, the founding fathers did not want a central banking system because they saw in England what it did in Great Britain,
Mm.
and they didn't want it. But it wasn't until Jekyll Island in 1919 that some congressmen went in when Congress was recessed and created this thing called the Federal Reserve. Because they met out on Jekyll Island, which was down out right off the coast of Georgia. Some people agreed to it. The right people agreed to it. They went in and approved it in December of 1919, and we get the Federal Reserve System, right? And not only did they create the Federal Reserve in 1919, but the same day that they created the Federal Reserve, they created the IRS and the FBI.
Oh wow.
All three of that happened. All three of that happened on the same day in 1919. But you got to know the history. It's just like a lot of people that talk about the U.S. being a Christian nation. Well, if you go back to the Constitution, the founding fathers were deists. In the Constitution, it says freedom of or from religion. So the United States was not born as a as a Christian nation. It became that afterwards only because of the practice of it.
Okay.
But it
Wow.
wasn't built on that whatsoever because they believed in a supreme being, but they did not believe, and they thought that religion in and of itself was not a good thing.
So that was your
Go look
separation
at
of church and state.
exactly. Go look at some of some of the things that Thomas Jefferson and the guys said about religion, and you'll see what they thought because he was a deist. He believed in a supreme being,
Okay.
but he it wasn't about religion.
Okay.
And that's in the Constitution. And people keep forgetting that.
Wow.
And
That's
so,
you. You
you
telling
got
me
to
something that's
reflect
new.
on
Well, you telling me
exactly.
something I
And
don't
see,
know. Put it that way.
well, see, here's the thing. When our kids are coming through school and we're learning civics and we're learning history, we got to remember that, man. We got to go back. See, I can go back to my social studies classes and I remember this stuff from school. And now, as it's, years and years ago that I was there. So now I go back and I can reconfirm what my thoughts were by pulling it up. What does it say in the Constitution? You pull up the Constitution and read it. It says freedom of or from religion.
But now we
And
have
slavery was
this
never,
evangelical movement that's inside of all politics now.
and they want to call it the American way, and it's American, and and again, when somebody, especially one of these evangelical people, tell me they're I had several ask me if I were a Christian. And I asked me, what does that mean? Do you want to be Christ-like or do you want to be a Christian? Those are two
Two
totally
different
different
things.
things.
Yeah.
You're being a Christian, which means that's a political movement for you. It's allowing you to get up on a soapbox and express your political viewpoints because that's all they're discussing. Abortion, non-abortion. That's at the root of the evangelicals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They've turned that into a political issue, right? It has nothing to do with Christ or Jesus. It has nothing to do with that. And so we get fooled into thinking because they call themselves Christians. Even if you take the look at some of the work by Dr. Professor Small out of New York, he said that Christianity started off in Rome as a political movement.
Okay.
That's how it started. And, as Dr. John Henry Clark said about us, we out Pope the Pope and out Muhammad, because we believe true to what we consider to be the religion, but they're using it for something totally different. Let's take Joel Osteen, for example. He paid $110 million for that arena down there that they've now paid off, and he turned it into a church. When 60 Minutes went into his church, there was not one Christian cross that they could find.
Hmm.
Not one picture of Jesus. Not one picture of Jesus was in that church. That was on 60 Minutes.
Wow.
So we get caught up in the pomp and circumstance without doing the research to understand what's really going on. If I can buy and renovate and pay this $110 million for a church, how much power and influence do I have in the community? I have a lot
Yeah. Yeah.
because I got a lot of people who giving me money.
Yeah.
So I can influence the political system. I don't have to say a whole lot. All I got to do is make some phone calls, and the people are going to take my calls because of who I am.
Mm-hmm.
Or if there's somebody who comes to me who has a similar interest, and maybe I'm not the one who wants to talk about politics, but somebody that I know is interested in politics, I can throw my weight behind them.
Yeah.
And so I can make things happen in my community. Because again, that's where the Houston Rockets used to play. That was an arena for the Houston Rockets. So it's got about 40 to 50,000 seats in it that he renovated and turned it into a church. and they paid it off early.
Wow. Wow. I mean, even if you just look into the Bible about building such grand structures, that's not supposed to happen. These huge buildings to worship in were actually spoke down on inside the
That's
Bible.
right. Inside the Bible, it says, "Do not build those grand structures to worship me." And remember, when Jesus went into the temple, he turned over the table
Mm-hmm.
because you had the money changers in there. And it also says in the Bible, don't go out in the woods and cut down no tree and bring it in talking about Christmas.
Yeah, yeah,
Because again, Christmas wasn't legal in the United States of America until 1836. It was illegal in the United States of America until 1836. And I began to count the years. I said, well, 1865 was when slavery, in 1836. So you're talking about 29 years between Christmas being legal in the U.S. and our ancestors being freed as slaves. So that for the most part, they knew nothing about what we call Christmas today. And now that I reflect back and I look at a lot of that, I've never seen anything in any slavery movies around Christmas
no, no.
because it was illegal.
you
It was
you know
considered a
what?
pagan holiday.
You brought that up. I've never seen a Christmas celebration in any slave movie I've ever seen.
And then no. And New Year's, December the 31st
Mm-hmm. Yep.
and January 1st was the worst time for a black family who were enslaved,
Yeah.
simply because that was the time where the masters was going to sell off or divide families
Yep.
because they were considered property and they would be taxed on those people.
Yep.
And so they knew at that time of the year, families could potentially be separated. And then being separated, it was the worst time of year for them.
So it was no Happy New Year.
It was no Happy New Year.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we've created this thing called Watch Night Service, which was
Mm-hmm.
really around the Emancipation Proclamation and whether or not it had been signed. That's why they gathered in the church that night to see if
Mm.
it had been signed. And now we consider it Watch Night Service, right? But we've turned it into something that it's not. And we'll go along with these holidays in this culture, not examining what actually happened. And so people can sell you anything because they sold you this idea of something that's not true, something that never happened historically. And I've heard Dr. Ray Hagan say we have to separate literature from history.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a
Uh,
lot of literature out there, but it doesn't make it doesn't mean that it's history.
yeah.
And so tradition, we've been sold a lot of stuff that's tradition
Yeah.
that has no roots in actual historical events whatsoever. And for me, I told a white friend of mine one day, I said, the more I do research on history, the madder I become. He says, why? I said, because it's intentional deceit.
Mm-hmm.
We've been intentionally deceived, being told these stories that are not true when this is what actually happened. Let's think about all the inventions that we hear about that our people describe. For instance, the first airship. The first airship was built by a black man, but yet they give Orville and the other
Yeah.
Wright brothers, the credit for building the first airplane when it wasn't. They were transporting this brother's airship, and he got a patent on it. But then all of a sudden, his airship disappeared because
Yeah.
they took it and destroyed it.
I mean, because
But
right
he built
there
the
we
first
didn't
plane.
have any rights, so I mean they could take and steal anything from us, and because we were at that time figured to be not that smart to be able to do that anyway. So if you say I built this, they're like, oh, you're black, you can't do that. So
And 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 then we want to give credit to Henry Ford for creating the manufacturing plant in which he built cars, when in fact It was George Washington Carver who taught him and showed him what it meant to have a plant to manufacture cars. And what he used to teach him that were plants outside. He showed him how the plants processed and created different things to continue to grow. And that's why the manufacturing facility is called a
A
plant,
plant.
because it was called a plant after the plant that Dr. Carver showed Henry Ford. Because remember, they pretty much had Henry Ford as one of their, they kept him around them all the time. George
Mm-hmm.
Washington Carver kept Henry Ford around him all the time because of his brilliance. So he was able to show the Ford family a lot of what to do and how to build.
Hmm. It's another interesting fact I didn't know, or a piece of information
Yes.
I didn't know.
Yeah, go look at the relationship between Henry Ford and George Washington Carver. He is the reason that the Ford family is successful as they are.
You know what? There's always been this thing that has bothered me too. It's like the brightest minds in the black community leaves the black community a lot of the times, right? It's like we don't ever try to find a way to keep them here so that they can help us build our own. We encourage them, hey, go work for IBM, go work for this company, that company, and it may be good, networking wise, but it's like we don't ever bring it back, so to speak, to help out correct me if I'm wrong, to help out those that's less fortunate,
There's nothing to correct.
you know. And I was and I've always been, you know, am I a Bible thumper? No. But like you said, the Bible has truth in it. And it says, to whom much is given, much is required. You know? And it's like the greatest amongst you are the actual servants. They're not to be worshiped, they are the servants. So
Dr. King talked about that. Dr. King talked about that. The first statement you made, what is it? You say that again. You said for those much is required. For whom much is given, much is
much is
required. Right.
hmm
There's a lady who said that to me. She says that to me all of the time. Right. There's a lady who says that to me all of the time.
okay.
Because I remember saying myself when someone asked me, said, "Well, Terry, are you going to come back, to Wilmington and help?" My answer was no, because we've been taught and conditioned that we need to go get a good job, make a good salary, and live a good life. That's what we've
Okay.
been taught. That's the narrative in the black community.
hmm
Education is extremely important. Got to get that. But instead of going to work for someone else, it should be about creating your own. And so
Yeah.
I'm definitely in agreement with that. And I've talked to many friends about it, and it's a struggle
Yeah.
because oftentimes we don't have in our community the institutions and the structures to support
Yeah.
what that looks
Yeah.
like, right? You know, we're jealous of somebody else who go and start a store because the first thing we want to say is, I'm not going to help them build a house. I'm not going to help them go buy a Cadillac. They're not going to buy a Cadillac with my money.
hmm
So we're not even thinking about the resources that we can, uh, what's the right word? Continue to keep in our communities,
Yeah.
right? We're thinking about other things and it's like my consulting business. There are very few, if any, businesses in Wilmington that can support the services that I offer.
Okay.
And then when I reduce the price and to get it down to where they are, the bottom line is we don't value education and scholarship as we value athletics and entertainment. And so my knowledge base, it many black scholars' knowledge base is not valued.
hmm
That's
Yep.
why you don't. That's why you see the athletes and the entertainers versus the scholars.
That was a. You know what? When Biden spoke, he doesn't bring scholars up. He brings
No.
he brings Cardi B up, Charlemagne the God. You know, he brings all those people because, like they said, there's a book. It's called Brainwash: Challenging the Myth of Black Inferiority, and they're talking about, you know, how we want to be entertained. We don't want to be educated, you know, and how much emphasis we put on having fun. And I've always told my children, if you take care of your business will take care of you. So if you do it
Absolutely.
early, man, you can live a life of having fun and making money at the same time if you do it correctly.
Absolutely. And when we think about the industries in which our people make the most money, entertainment and athletics,
Mm-hmm.
those are the same industries and the same things that we did on the weekends to humor the slave master.
Yeah.
How fast can he run?
Yeah.
How strong is he? How high can he jump?
Mm-hmm.
How well can she sing? How well can he dance? Or can they cook?
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are the industries where we are making the majority of our money. And that's exactly what we did for the master in slavery. And so we're not familiar with this brother being, or we want to consider him a nerd because he's
Mm.
brilliant with computers, or he's brilliant with math. I follow this brother on Facebook. I want to say he spells his name Akii, and everything he do is around mathematics. So I saw what he was doing. So I hit him in the inbox one day. I said, brother, give me a call. Put my number in there. So he called me, told me that he was out of Virginia and he's probably in his 30s, but he was a math major and he understands the importance. And so his goal is to ensure that all of our people, especially the youth, have a clear understanding of mathematics. So he puts on courses online and all that kind of stuff, YouTube courses.
You
And
said
so
AKII?
yeah, what I'll do later today is I'll make sure I'll put your name in with one of his posts so you can see it and you guys can connect, right?
Okay.
Because it's I mean geometry, algebra, trigonometry, you name it. And I told a friend of mine some years ago, this was my discovery only a few years ago in adulthood now. Algebra is about change. Geometry is about structure.
Shapes.
Statistics is about probability. Algebra 2 is about continuous change. And then you get trigonometry that gives you a little bit of all of it. Now, math was never described to me that way. Algebra has changed. So now, when I go on TikTok and I see these mathematical equations and how they're doing square root of this and this and this and this, I have a much better understanding and I can walk through the processes with them much better now because I have the context of what I'm dealing with, cosine and tangent and cotangent.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going through learning this stuff in undergrad and in high school and undergrad and masters and PhD, not truly understanding it because I didn't have the context around what it
You're
was.
just solving
But
problems.
yes, I'm solving the problems, but
Equations.
I don't know
Equations. Yeah.
these equations around change, and this equation is around a structure, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so now I can implement that into consulting because I could talk about continuous change, which we're always talking about change management, and I can elaborate it from a mathematical perspective, right? And now I can tell a young brother that you are a walking mathematical equation and that your brain automatically does geometry. Let me tell you how. Do you play basketball? Yes, I play basketball. Okay, when you're coming down court and you're on a fast break and you dribbling and you pull up for a jump shot and you at the side of the basket and you decide to use the glass, you're shooting at an angle. That ball is at an angle.
At an
It
angle. Yeah.
has a It has a trajectory to it, right?
Right, right.
All of those are mathematical terms. So your brain is already going through the process of solving the equation of making the jump shot off the glass.
You just don't know
There's a
what it is.
Exactly. There's a speed that's there's a velocity that when you come and you dribbling the ball coming down the court and you're going X amount of miles per hour, there's a velocity to that. That's
Yeah.
all mathematics. If I'm playing football and I'm a receiver and I go down and I'm running a post, or if I'm running a post or a flag, or if I'm running a cross pattern, I'm cutting at a particular angle, 45 degrees, 90 degrees,
Yeah.
60 degrees, or
And
all mathematics.
and those that play football knows the importance of that cut, that angle. You don't round it off. It is an angle. You have to go. Remember your quick slants. It's okay. Oh,
It's all mathematics,
all
man.
mathematics.
And so the brain, so that says that you can do math.
You just didn't know you
It just
could.
has, you didn't know you could because it hasn't been given to you in the proper context.
Wow. Yeah, I gotta,
So
you
when
gotta, you gotta hook me up with that brother, man, because that in and of itself seems like would be a great foundation of teaching these young kids, especially our young brothers out here, young kids. Yo, you can do math. It ain't that hard. You,
It's not. Look, when you get out of bed in the morning and you slide to the edge of the mattress and you put your feet down on the floor, and it's at a particular angle, right?
Mhm.
Because if it's not at that angle, then you can't stand up. We use it every day. Because I
Yeah,
remember man, I remember taking geometry and algebra. I ain't gonna ever use this in my life, but I
you
use
use
it
it
every
every
day.
day.
As I walk, as I run, use it every day. But again, that didn't hit me until I'm well into adulthood, because I'm thinking about it from the educational perspective and being in school. I'm not thinking about the angles that I'm taking as I walk, as I run, as I get out of bed. I'm not thinking about any of that because it's never been taught to me that way. But if it's taught that way and you understand it and the brain is already doing it, now I just need to be able to understand how to put it to paper.
Right, man. Yeah. And see, you just made me look at math totally different. I remember taking martial arts. It was an Egyptian art called
Mm,
Ahasaki, and they were talking about sacred geometry, right? And there's a
mm,
22-degree angle in which you can stand where someone that's bigger than you cannot push you over. And it was like, man, if all football linemen were taught this angle, how much more effective would they actually become? Man, you just
Look, man, martial arts. If you get the kids into martial arts and the yoga prior to playing sports,
discipline, structure.
absolutely. Because I would tell my daughter all the time, structure, discipline, structure and process creates discipline. Because the
Mm,
martial arts is a structured way with a process of either defending yourself, or in Aikido, because I've taken some Aikido,
okay.
it's about using someone else's force against them, right? It's not the offensive. It's not. I'm not on the offense in Aikido.
It's
I'm
yeah.
actually on the defense by using somebody else's energy
Mm-hmm.
against them,
Yeah.
right? And I've taken some Abaguajan, right? And that's all. And they call those the internal art, right? And so in doing so, you get the chance to understand that. And let me say this about the educational system. It's doing exactly what it's designed to do right now.
That's you're right.
And the system overall is not failing. The system is doing what it's
It's doing what
supposed
it's
to do.
supposed to do. Yeah. What it's
And the
set up to
system
do.
is the system has never been broken. The system is doing these system was never well, yeah, our system is broken. We got to fix it. No, it's not
No.
broken. It's doing exactly what the designers wanted it to do. And
Yeah.
and we're seeing the consequences of that because we were never part of the system. They had to write us into the Constitution. They had to write us into the schools. How many textbooks that you know are written by black authors? None. So when African people learning a you're learning a Eurocentric system, that in and of itself is confusing to the brain.
Yeah,
Because remember, all of our learning for the most part was oral.
that's right.
Now, not to say that we didn't have books, everything was written in hieroglyphics, but a lot of it was storytelling. So now, if you go to corporate America, they want to know how well you can tell stories because they stole that storytelling from us. If you think about the great speakers they consider to be great, the Tony Robbins, they get up on stage and they tell stories, right? That storytelling came from our ancestors.
And we've gotten away from it, all
Yes,
of
we
it.
have. The old traditions, the oral traditions, that's how our people learn. Our brothers weren't learning back in the day uh, mathematics, and they weren't learning how to be a carpenter because they were in a classroom, trying to figure out Pythagorean's theorem or 45-degree angles and cuts with a saw. No, they learned it hands on,
Hands on. Yep.
but they just knew they could go into a room and look and say, okay, I need to do this, 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 and this. Let me get the saw.
Based on experience, you know,
Exactly.
and see, and that was a, because I've worked in, I was actually a security guard in a high school, and I used to, do, I was IT person in Head Start,
Hmm. Hmm.
and what I've understood and what I see is, you know, the young men that are so energetic, it's like, get them out of those seats. Stop trying to confine them to an area. It's about rhythm, movement, learning. You know, we had what you call Votex centers at one time. So you go to school for half a day, learn books, and then for the other half, man, you go learn some hands-on skills. And that's what I believe a lot of, our young men don't have ADHD and all this. What they need to be, what do you call it? They need their minds interested. They need to be interested in what they are doing, right? So if you give them, if you can make it interesting, let them move. Let them, instead of, hey, read this, 5 apples plus 5 apples is 10. Hey, how about you grab 5 apples, grab another five, and now tell me how much that is. Now take away two, how much is that? As opposed to looking at everything in a book and falling asleep because you got somebody up here that's as interesting as wet paint drying, you know.
You know, I agree with you, and I'm gonna say this last thing because I gotta go. I got a 12
Okay.
o'clock meeting I need to run to. But you said something real interesting about rhythm, and I'm gonna use this example. Shaquille O'Neal is a great basketball player,
Hmm.
one of the greatest centers we've ever known. He was a horrible free throw shooter. There are many other great basketball players that we know who could hit a jump shot on the run, on the move, but if you put them at the free throw line, they didn't do well.
Right.
The key was rhythm. What happens at the free throw line is I take a couple of dribbles, I stop, I look at the basket. Now I got to begin a motion to shoot.
Hmm.
One, I get into thinking too much about the shot. And now I got to move my body in a particular way. I got to take it from still to static to movement.
Yep.
No rhythm, no rhythm whatsoever. So when we look at the brothers and they say, well, the brother can't shoot free throws, that's the reason. Because if he were on a fast break and he was dribbling, he's gone between his legs, behind his back. He's looked to the right, looked to the left, and he's decided all of a sudden he's gonna pull up for a jumper or he's gonna take it and he's gonna dunk it. That's all within a rhythm.
That's what's in the rhythm. Yep.
So we go back to vibration, frequency, and energy.
Yep.
All of that is about rhythm. A rhythm comes from that, actually, all of those things,
Hmm.
right? Vibration, energy, because what happens is as the vibration happens, the rhythm occurs. And so we have to understand that and everybody's rhythm is different. One of the things that, and I wrote an article, I don't know if you read it, but I wrote an article called The Rhythm of Leadership around companies. You can tell when a company is running and it's a fine tune because it's within a particular rhythm related to that CEO, his spirit, and his thought processes. It's on LinkedIn, the
Okay.
rhythm of leadership.
Rhythm.
And so, for those companies that are not doing well, let's take for instance the University of Michigan football.
Mm-hmm.
Jim Harbaugh being suspended for 3 games or whatever that was, right? And that brother stepped in. It was obvious that there was a rhythm there within that program,
And he
and that
kept the
brother just
rhythm
stepped
going.
into that rhythm. He kept it. He didn't try to interrupt the rhythm. He kept it going. Now they've named him what, head coach of the
Head
Michigan
coach. Yeah.
program now, right?
Yeah.
So it's everything. Everything is about rhythm. Your walk. Hey, we see how we talk about how white people can't dance, right? And actually, that's the reason that they created line dancing. When you look at
It's a
line dancing, and
routine.
it's a routine, and the routines are for the people with OCD. Dr. Laila Africa talks about that. I'm gonna send you the piece where he
Yeah.
talks about people with OCD. They have to have a process, and that's a process of dancing. That's a
That's why it looks
structured
so
way
robotic and
versus exactly. And we have all fallen for it,
yeah.
right? I got to go to a line dancing class so I can do this dance that's correlated with this particular
Yeah.
song, where everything used to be, it was
Just
freestyle.
just move it.
It was just moving, right? And there would be certain dances that would come along that be the dance of that particular season, but it was still a freestyle because
Mm-hmm.
somewhere it was created. It
Yeah.
wasn't left foot here and right foot here. Now, ballroom dancing is more of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the shag and all that kind of stuff, which they got from us, right? But that was all a flow. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't as robotic as line dancing.
You're right.
So again, well, look, brother, I know I need to run. I
Yeah,
need to
man, I
go get
appreciate you,
myself
Doc,
together.
man.
Yes, sir.
Hey,
Yes,
but
sir.
but
Yes,
you
sir.
know
I
what?
appreciate you.
I am coming
Yes.
down to Wilmington. Let's set up a time, man. I would love to spend the day with
Okay.
you, man, record some stuff and see these sites down in Wilmington, bro. And I do appreciate you spending the time with me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I'm going to connect you with the gentleman on Facebook,
Yes, sir.
with the math,
Okay.
and you could begin to follow him, and I would reach out to him as well, man, because that's all his posts is purely mathematics,
Okay.
purely
Wow.
mathematics. So I'll make that connection today.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you.
Yes, sir, man. I appreciate you, brother.
All
Have a
right.
good one, and I look forward to it.
I would like to thank Dr. Terry Jackson for taking away from his busy schedule to do the PowerCast with me. I appreciate each and every one of you guys that watched, commented, liked, shared, and subscribed to the channel. And as always, just remember, unity in our community creates opportunities for you and me.